Yo, y'all remember Rival Schools? No? Let me give you a refresher. Rival Schools is a Capcom fighting game series that debuted in arcades in 1997. Capcom's second attempt at a 3D fighter following Star Gladiator, Rival Schools' entire conceit is taking an everyday, relatable aspect of life and viewing it through the lens of a fighting game. In this case, the relatable aspect being going to school. Helmed by Capcom legend Hideaki Itsuno, Rival Schools has a colorful cast of characters that represent the kinds of people you'd see in schools. Jocks, delinquents, exchange students, teachers, the school nurse, and so on. It was ported to PlayStation in 1998 to near perfection, owing to the game's arcade board, the Sony ZN2, essentially being a PlayStation with a bigger RAM pool to work with. The PlayStation port is notably one of Capcom's first major attempts at crafting a unique experience for players at home, adding mini-games, character creation mode, and a full-on school simulation mode, the latter of which was only in the Japanese release. The PS1 port is also infamous for including Sakura from Street Fighter as a guest character, hoping she would attract fans of Street Fighter to Rival Schools. Whether or not this crossover was canon was the subject of debate for many years, but it finally got put to rest during Street Fighter V's final season, where Akira appears as a guest character herself and explicitly mentions Sakura being around for Rival Schools events. The sequel, Project Justice, released in the arcades in 2000 and got a well-regarded Dreamcast port the following year. The plot of Rival Schools centers around a series of kidnappings involving local high school students and staff. Several characters, some of whom have loved ones that were kidnapped, band together to figure out the mystery behind the disappearances. For an arcade game, Rival Schools had a pretty big focus on plot, something that even Street Fighter didn't really do much outside of Street Fighter Alpha 2 and 3. Characters were formed into different trios depending on the high school they went to, and the most front-facing trio was the Taiyo High Trinity, consisting of Hinata Wakaba, Batsu Ichimonji, and Kyosuke Kagami. For all intents and purposes, Batsu is positioned as the protagonist of the series, but Kyosuke is absolutely the series' deuteragonist. Batsu is in it to find out what happened to his missing mother, while Kyosuke helps investigate, hiding that he may have more knowledge about the situation than he lets on. Batsu and Kyosuke are total polar opposites of each other. Batsu is hot-headed, stubborn, and prone to outbursts of anger, whereas Kyosuke is level-headed, calm, and tends to think before he acts, with Hinata serving as the glue holding them all together. Despite this, they work well together and eventually get to the bottom of the mystery concerning Justice High. Rival Schools is interesting in that it's notably the only other traditional fighting game series outside of the Versus games to be a team-based fighter from Capcom, and even shares similar air combo mechanics. The Versus games managed to land not one, but two Rival Schools characters over the course of the series, Kyosuke in Capcom vs SNK 2, and Batsu in Tatsunoko vs Capcom. Both are really interesting inclusions for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is how they implement Rival Schools mechanics into their respective movesets. I'm going to tackle both characters in the order they came to the Versus games, so let's get started with Kyosuke's CVS2 appearance. Kyosuke Kagami is a member of the Taiyo High Morals Committee. He investigates the disappearances alongside Hinata and Batsu while harboring a huge secret. He was the one behind the kidnappings on the orders of his asshole twin brother Hio, who wanted to brainwash everyone and take over Japan. Kyosuke, wanting his brother to come to his senses, switches sides and firmly allies himself with Batsu and Hinata, hoping them take Hio down. As it turns out, Raizo, Batsu's father, is both Kyosuke and Hio's uncle, making Batsu and Kyosuke cousins. In Project Justice, Kyosuke once again investigates alongside Batsu and Hinata when several important characters from the first game either go missing or turn up brainwashed, alongside reports that someone looking like Batsu is out causing mischief. He gets concerned that Hio may once again be involved and on the wrong side of things, only to find out that Hio himself only pretended to be brainwashed in order to figure out the main antagonist Kuro's plans. Some more brainwashing shenanigans involving Hio and his evil dead father happen, and long story short, Kyosuke is forced to fight Hio again, though this time Hio doesn't survive. Kyosuke disappears after that and is mentioned not having been seen since his passing, though Batsu mentions that he believes Kyosuke still will end up coming back one day. Well, apparently, Kyosuke must have wanted to bust some SNK heads because his next fighting game appearance was in Capcom vs SNK 2 in 2001. Kyosuke's addition to the roster was somewhat unexpected, considering how heavy the Capcom side of the roster leans on Street Fighter with a sprinkling of Final Fight and Darkstalkers. But when you keep in mind that Itsuno directed both Rival Schools and the Capcom vs SNK games, things start making a little more sense. Kyosuke's voice actor is Isshin Chiba, who's done a good amount of voice work in both video games and anime, but as far as fighting games are concerned, also notably voiced two other characters. He was the voice of Jeddah in Darkstalkers and all of the crossover appearances he's had with the exception of Marvel Infinite, but his most well-known role by a good green country mile is as Jin Kazama in Tekken, having played him since Jin's first appearance in Tekken 3, making him one of the longest tenured voice actors for a specific video game character. For as cool and flashy as Kyosuke's moveset is, he's unfortunately seen as the worst character in the game outside of maybe Dan. While he's not an intentional joke character like Dan, Kyosuke's best stuff is very situational at best and completely useless at worst. He does, however, have one mechanic unique to him, his launcher. By pressing down, forward, and heavy kick, Kyosuke can launch his opponent into the air and follow up with an air combo. This, of course, is taken directly from the Rival School series, where air combos work the exact same way, even having a similar input for the launcher. Kyosuke does have another launcher as well, but we'll get into that a little later. Kyosuke's first move is Crosscutter, a projectile that fans out before converging again near the opponent. He's had this since the first Rival Schools game. Next is Raijin Upper, done with a Dragon Punch motion and punch. Kyosuke does a quick upward strike that summons a column of lightning. He's also had this since Rival Schools. Gine Kick is done with a quarter circle forward motion and kick. Kyosuke does an upwards crescent-shaped kick that lands him a little bit forwards from where he started the motion. This can be done in the air as well. This can also be comboed into from Raijin Upper as well. Gine Wave is done with a quarter circle forward motion in the air. Gine Breaker is a leaping overhead strike done with a quarter circle back and punch. Kyosuke's first super is Kakusan Crosscutter, a powered up version of his standard Crosscutter.
What we like to call big.
Next is Double Gine Kick. This one can be done in the air as well and can also be air comboed into.
What we like to call big damage.
Super Raijin Upper is a powered up version of his standard Raijin Upper. Some fans might recognize this from Project Justice, but that actually wasn't the first game he had it in. Funnily enough, it wasn't in the original arcade or PS1 release of Rival Schools either, at least initially. It debuted in Shiritsu Justice Gakuen Neketsu Seishun Nikki 2, the Japan-only PS1 update of Rival Schools. It most notably came with a full-on sequel to the initial PS1 release's School Simulation mode. However, it also added new content to the fighting game half of the package as well, including 2 new characters, a new stage, and some balance tweaks, one of which was this new super for Kyosuke. In every game it's appeared in, Super Raijin Upper also functions as a launcher, so Kyosuke can go up into the air to continue the combo, even in TVS2. He can also even link this into the Aryu version of Double Gine Kick if timed properly. It's more flashy than practical though. Kyosuke's final super is Final Symphony Remix, where he calls in Batsu and Hinata to pummel the opponent before all 3 characters perform one final strike on them. This is Well, a remixed version of Final Symphony, which was Kyosuke's triple team attack in Project Justice. He's a little more active in the Project Justice version of the attack, admittedly. One interesting thing about a lot of Capcom's 2D fighting games is that a lot of them had large chunks of their text dialogue excised completely during English localization. Capcom vs SNK 2 is probably the biggest example of this. In the English versions of CVS 2, characters have a handful of generic win quotes and that's about it. But in the original Japanese release, nearly every character has unique windscreen dialogue with every other character on the roster, and going even further, there's even a good amount of unique dialogue for having specific team combinations as well. I'm working on a video going more into detail on that, so keep an eye out. I mention all of that because he has a handful of win quotes in the Japanese release that are pretty neat. His win quote against Blanca has him note that he looks like the father of a friend of his. Given the hair, he's probably talking about Raizo, Batsu's father and Kyosuke's uncle. Sakura also has a win quote against him mentioning that they fought before, referring to her cameo as a guest character in the PS1 version of Rival Schools. He also has a fun win quote against Terry where he says that he reminds him of some friends of his across the ocean. He's almost definitely referring to Roy, who lives in the US, but along with Tiffany and Bowman, are exchange students in Rival Schools. Roy himself is an obvious homage to Terry, both moveset and design-wise. I mean, come on, that's Power Dunk. And here are all of Kyosuke's colors. His light kick color is his second player color from Rival Schools. After the Versus series' hiatus for most of the 2000s, the Versus series was resurrected with the release of Tatsunoko vs. Capcom Crush Generation of Heroes in 2008, followed by an internationally released update, Ultimate All-Stars, in 2010. According to interviews with the development team, they knew from the start that they wanted a Rival Schools character on the Capcom side, and they had essentially narrowed it down to either Batsu or Hinata. They ended up going with Batsu in the end because he's a bit more recognizable as the lead protagonist of the series. In Rival Schools, Batsu is looking for his kidnapped mother. Over the course of the game, he meets the principal of Justice High, who is later revealed to be his father, Raizo. After the events of Rival Schools, once Raizo is freed from his brainwashing by Hio, he reconciles with Batsu and his wife. In Project Justice, reports start going around that someone looking like Batsu is going around attacking students at different schools. In reality, this is part of a four-pronged plan orchestrated by Project Justice's main antagonist, Kuro. He takes one of the biggest threats to his plan, Raizo, out of commission shortly before the events of the game, brainwashes Daigo Kazuma, Akira's older brother, and has him mindlessly attacking other schools, and masquerades as Batsu to sow distrust among the schools and their student bodies. One really neat thing Project Justice's story mode does is that the story can branch at certain points depending on how you finish off an opponent, or if you lose or win a fight. For example, in the Taiyo High story mode, if you lose a specific fight, Batsu leaves the trio for a bit, with Chairperson replacing him, before coming back later to save Hinata from an otherwise fatal attack in a new powered-up form, burning Batsu. Batsu's voice actor in Rival Schools in Tatsunoko vs. Capcom is Nobuyuki Hayama, who I've actually mentioned in a previous video. He was also the longtime voice of Joe Higashi in SNK's fighters up to KOF 13. He's also the voice of Siegfried in the Soul Calibur series, as well as the Ocarina of Time adult incarnation of Link in the Legend of Zelda series, and his associated crossover appearances in Smash Bros. Melee and Soul Calibur 2. Batsu's theme in Cross Generation of Heroes is an arrangement of the Taiyo High rooftop theme from the first Rival Schools game. It's a pretty great arrangement, though I think I very slightly prefer the original, thanks to that distinctive Capcom guitar sample. You know the one. Batsu's moveset, like Kyosuke's, translates pretty well into the versus games. Since air combos are already a universal mechanic in Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, Batsu slots in pretty nicely. He gets 2 of his command normals from rival schools in Project Justice, his overhead done with forward and medium, and his elbow strike done with forward and heavy. We'll be circling back to these command normals in a bit, as they play into a unique rival schools mechanic that Batsu gets in this game. Batsu's first special move is Guts Bullet. The strength and distance are dictated by the strength of the attack button. This can also be done in the air. Next is Guts Upper, done with a Dragon Punch motion and attack.
Yes!
Crescent Kick is the following move, done with a quarter circle back and attack.
Yes! 3! Yes!
How far he travels depends on the strength of the attack button. Next is Shooting Star Kick. A dive kick Batsu can perform in the air by doing a quarter circle back motion and kick. Of all the tools in Batsu's moveset, this is the one you want to familiarize yourself with, as it's a massive part of his game plan. Its utility is twofold. It gives him a ton of mobility. In a game where nearly everyone has an air dash or two, having the ability to zip across the screen at will and relatively safely can only be a boon. Moreover, this move has also become the cornerstone of Batsu's offense as well. Tiger kneeing the motion by ending at up back instead of just back allows for 2 things. It lets Batsu chain up to 4 dive kicks in a row during an air combo. Considering that this can be cancelled into a hyper combo as well, that damage adds up. More importantly though, it allows for his dive kick loops. Tiger kneeing the dive kick also allows for Batsu to instant air dash afterwards, allowing him to keep the opponent juggled with 2 well-timed jumping mediums into another dive kick, rinse, and repeat.
Very good!
Batsu's first hyper combo is Super Guts Bullet.
Very good!
This can be done in the air as well. Batsu's next hyper combo is Super Guts Upper. This one comes from Project Justice. Batsu's level 3 is United by Fate, the name itself being a shout out to the English subtitle for Rival School's international release. It's one of the more unique level 3s in the game because it changes depending on Batsu's partner. If his partner is Ryu, Chun-Li, Morrigan, Beautiful Joe, Zero, Ipatsuman, Ken, or Yatterman 1, he gets United by Fate Bullet. This one's based on his Double Guts Bullet team-up super from Rival Schools. If his partner is Alex, Frank, Volnut, Soki, Joe the Condor, Palomar, or Tekkaman, he gets United by Fate Upper. You can actually combo after this one as well. If his partner is Jude the Swan, Karis, their own Joe, Kashan, Tekkaman Blade, Saki, Roll, or Yatterman number 2, he gets United by Fate Kick.
Good! Assist okay! Good!
Given the flips and ending with a dive kick, this seems to at least loosely reference Akira and Daigo's Team Super from Rival Schools. If you use Batsu's level 3 with a knocked out partner, he'll do United by Fall, which is essentially the bullet variant, but the ghost of his KO teammate appears alongside him as he sheds tears while doing the attack. Moreover, this version gets an absurd damage boost, making it the strongest of the variations by far.
Very good!
Batsu's assist is Guts Upper.
Assist okay!
There's one more thing to talk about in regards to Batsu, and it's a unique mechanic only he gets in this game. Tardy counters are in concept rival schools answer to the Alpha counter in Street Fighter or the guard cancel in Darkstalkers, to name a few. By doing a command normal or special move motion while in block stun, characters can cancel into whatever move they input. This makes for a pretty satisfying way to take your turn back offensively, so to speak. Even cooler is that your opponent can tardy counter your tardy counter, making for some great mind games if both players are cognizant enough. In TVC, Batsu has the ability to tardy counter into either of his command normals, the medium overhead or the heavy elbow, which staggers and is generally the more combo-friendly option. Batsu gets armor during the counter frames, but he can be hit out of it if he's countering the wrong move. Make the right call, however, and you can even tardy counter hyper combos. Plus, you can even use the opportunity to set up his dive kick loops since doing the tardy counter gives you red life you can spend on Baroque.
Very good.
Here are all of Batsu's colors. And here are Batsu's endings. Of Capcom's mini fighting game IP, Rival Schools is the one that I think is the most interesting conceptually. It's like the daydreams of an adolescent fighting game fan come to life, and both games, even the first one, still hold up exceedingly well today, thanks to some killer art design. And as someone who was that daydreaming adolescent fighting game fan at one point in time, the series still speaks to me. The series has shown up in other crossovers over the years. Hideo and Kyoko were a pair unit in Namco Cross Capcom. Kyosuke was a card in Heroes and Heralds in Marvel 3. Batsu was a solo unit in Project Cross Zone. But most recently and significantly, Akira appeared as a playable character in Street Fighter V's final season, marking the first time since Tatsunoko vs. Capcom that a Rival Schools character was playable in a fighter. Given the love and care that was put into her there, it's clear Capcom still cares about the series. In a world where games with sim elements are all the rage like Persona, I think it'd be interesting to see a new Rival Schools game take some cues from that series in regards to single player content. The series was already halfway there with the school sim stuff in the Japanese PS1 releases. Itsuno has maintained that Rival Schools is a series he'd like to return to someday, and has apparently had a scenario for a third game thought up for a while. But I guess we'll have to see if that ever pans out. That's going to do it for this video. Thanks as always for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I'll see you next time. Take care.